Part 2, McGill Reformatory, 1959. We got woken up each morning at 6 by a guard yelling, "Wakey, wakey, hands off Snakey." It was still dark outside. We weren't allowed to put boots on, no matter how cold the floor. Farm work for sentenced kids began at 7, and the rest of us guys on remand hung around till the lousy 7:15 breakfast. And those of us on remand were not given a job. We had to be fed and finished in 10 minutes, so it was necessary to bolt the food. At 7:30, a screw yelled out, "Get your boots on!" And we got our boots on. And we stayed inside until 9 a.m, then lined up in the yard, where speakers on the wall somewhere blared out the theme from Bridge on the River Kwai. It was a movie, look it up. We lined up in 4 rows and marched up and back for 2 hours. I made sure I kept in step. We called the drill officer Colonel Bogey. He was feared and hated. I managed well because we used to march every Friday in primary school, and I used to pretend I was a brave soldier on my way to fight the Germans. So when I marched in McGill, my mind was miles away. But after an hour, some got tired and made mistakes. Then frog hopping began. If you make a mistake, you squat on your heels with knees spread out, with hands on hips, and hop like a frog without losing balance. That was the punishment if you didn't march good. But I managed okay. At 10 a.m, we had a treasured 15-minute break in which to lay about smoking and wishing time would stand still so we'd not have to resume the bloody frog hop. We got 1 ounce of tobacco every week. Kids 14 and 15 and 16 and 17 were given tobacco back then. And 2 packets of papers. And after a miserable lunch came the hard stuff. From 1 o'clock until 4, we ran laps around a large recreation room. Kids who got exhausted were caned on the legs. Good runners like me just made it. Every 30 minutes we had to stop and do 10 minutes of press-ups. Nobody croaked while I was there, but I heard a fat kid died once. And visits were allowed at 3 o'clock, but only from relatives, never from friends. I prayed to God for one just to get out of the PT torture for an hour. My dad came once but looked embarrassed, and we had little to say. And every Thursday was payday. Kids over 14 got to choose between an ounce of tobacco or 2 blocks of chocolate. Under 14s got chocolate, but they must have been in another section because I never saw any under 14s. We loved smoko. It was the only time we could relax. After a tiny evening meal, we got locked in a big recreation room to socialise. An officer entered about 9 o'clock and made us play Red Rover. Wearing our heavy boots, about 30 grouped at one end of the room. A kid in the middle had to catch one of the 29 trying to reach the other side. If he grabbed anyone, the 2 of them had to grab some of the 28 in the next rush. Eventually there'd be more in the middle and less trying to get through. Tough kids loved it, and we weak ones hated it. Eventually there'd be 20 in the middle and 10 left to run, and the screws thought it worked off aggression, I guess. I was so happy when it was over. Then I had to worry about getting naked into the showers without anyone pinching my tobacco, or worse. Water was too hot or too cold and came from shower heads with no dividing walls. When I turned my hot tap on, the water in the next shower went cold. A Koori Aboriginal kid next to me, King, hit me. And I picked myself up and he said, "Don't go making me cold, you white cunt." From then on, I was a little prejudiced. Aboriginals made up 20% of McGill, but I saw no evidence of gangs. They seemed to love fighting, so I stayed clear. At 10 p.m, we slept in a I don't know how many beds, about 15 beds, a 15 or 20 bed dormitory where I'd get under me one blanket, that's all they gave us, one blanket each, and lay awake, keeping guard in case anyone tried to biff me or fuck me. There must have been some sort of security because nothing happened. Then I'd fall into an exhausted sleep as a result of the trauma of each long day. A poor fat kid, was teased perpetually. He looked like Billy Bunter, that old story about a fat kid in the English books, kids' books. He wore glasses and he was the butt of jokes from officers as well as boys. And I'd never seen such an emotionally wrecked kid. He cried a lot, but I didn't have the guts to help him in case I became the target instead. If anyone tried to escape, some inmates tried to catch him. And I said, why do the buggers help the screws by catching a guy? And a kid said, whoever catches him gets time off their sentence. A gawky kid with a Jerry Lee Lewis nerdy haircut sat next to me. He was close to an albino as I've ever seen. And he was called the Parramatta Kid because he stole cars, and he was respected because of that. He was the only one of us who'd seen Johnny O'Keefe in person and insisted that Parramatta had more bodgies than Adelaide. A bodgie's a juvenile delinquent. Parramatta said to me, do you know why that kid over there's called Mousy? And I said, because he's got a face like a mouse. And he nodded his head and he said, yeah, but he's also got a pet mouse he takes everywhere, never lets it out of his sight. He thinks we all want to steal it. When Mousy came back from the dunny, the kid said to me, see that bit of string tied around his belt? Yeah. Well, the other end's tied around the mouse, and he lets it run around inside his undies and gets a stiffy from it. And I looked at Mousy's pants and saw a mouse movement, and Mousy's eyes were closed and he had a beatific smile. Then a tall, handsome kid came in, and I asked him what he was in for, and he said, on a plane going from Melbourne to Adelaide, I found a kid's pop gun. So I pointed it at a stewardess and said, land this plane in Adelaide or I'll pop ya. Well, she went bananas, and when we landed, I got arrested for bloody fuck all. We called him the hijacker and treated him with respect. He had an unending repertoire of jokes like, a meatball walks into a pub, the barman says, sorry, we don't serve food in here. And what do you call a boomerang that won't come back? And we thought about it, and we said, a boomerang? Or an escapee-a-rang? Or a shitty boomerang? But he finally educated us. A stick. It was the longest 3 weeks of my life. Every day seemed eternity, but it passed, and I was released with a 12-month good behaviour bond. That last morning when I handed back those itchy woolen brown trousers and was given my own clothes, I was surprised to see they'd been laundered. Dressed in me stovepipe pants and with a grey school blazer, and I slicked back me hair like Gene Vincent and strutted out of the joint. I was the happiest kid in the universe, and I vowed I couldn't stand to go back in there, so I'll never steal again. Then I thought some more and said, well, I might, but I'll wait until I'm 18, because it'll be easier in an adult jail than that rotten place. And you know what? It was.